Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be chatting through all of the series that I am up to date on. So I did this video last year and now I guess my update on how I'm getting on with my series. So these are the ones where I am fully up to date, and the reason I have not finished them is because the next book has not been published yet. So in total there are 16 of them, which I think is in a similar-ish position to last year. I think last year I had around 20 and now it's at 16. So a very similar position for the up-to-date series, but it's the ongoing series where I've definitely made some improvements. But okay, so these are my up-to-date series. I have split them up into piles. So I have the ones where there is going to be the sequel coming out within this year, because there are quite a few sequels coming out at the end of November. So I'm not going to be up to date on these for very long. But ones where there has been an announcement for the sequel coming next year, and ones where I don't know when there's going to be the next one, or there hasn't been a release date. So that's how I thought I would organise them. Right, so for the ones that are coming out this year, I am up to date currently on the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. The third book, Cytonic, comes out later on this month, and I'm definitely interested in reading that. I have loved both Skyward and Starsight. I've really enjoyed this series by Brandon Sanderson. I just find it so fun and engaging, and I really like the characters. I like the sci-fi setting. I just have really enjoyed this. I don't think that I'm going to read Cytonic on release, purely because I read both Skyward and Starsight quite a while ago. So what I'm thinking that I'm going to do with this series is that I'm going to leave Cytonic for a little bit, and then close to the publication of the fourth book, which I think is next year, maybe. Although maybe that's ambitious, having both the fourth Skyward and Wax and Wayne 4 in the same year. Anyway, well, whenever the fourth book has a release date and an announcement, then I will start my reread of Skyward, Starsight. I'll read the novellas that have just come out, and then I'll read Cytonic all in a go, and the fourth book, as opposed to rereading this now for Cytonic and then having to reread it again potentially when the fourth book comes out. So that is my thinking for this. So it will soon be passing off into the incomplete series list. Another one is the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. The third and final book, Jade Legacy, comes out right at the end of November or beginning of December here in the UK, and I'm so excited for Jade Legacy. This one is going to move very quickly from my up-to-date series with a very brief stopover into incomplete before heading straight to complete, because I plan to read Jade Legacy pretty much straight away. As soon as I get that book in my hands, I'm going to read it because I'm so excited for its release. I have loved the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Like, it's been an absolute favourite. When I read Jade War earlier this year, I loved it. It's fantasy, mafia, warring clans, and the sort of family drama. It's very slow burn, I would say. It's not like the fastest paced book. If you don't like the characters, I think you might have issues with it, because the characters, they're not all necessarily that likable, but yeah, I do really like reading about them. So I'm so excited for Jade Legacy. I've heard such great reviews from people that have had advanced copies of it. So The Bone Shard Daughter or The Drowning Empire by Andrea Stewart. I have read this first book. The second book, The Bone Shard Emperor, comes out later on this month in November, and I definitely do plan to read that relatively soon, I think, after the release. Hopefully within this year I plan to get to the second book and keep this series up to date. I found this a really solid debut. I believe it's her debut. I really liked that there's multiple perspectives, and some perspectives in first person, some in third, and the sort of bone shard construct magic that is used, that these constructs or sort of animals they're created through these bones from people, and I found that a really interesting concept. So definitely intrigued to see where it goes. It was very fast paced and I flew through this, so definitely interested to see what happens next. And then the final series that has a book coming out within this year is the Beautiful series by Renee Ahdieh. I've read both The Beautiful and The Damned, and The Righteous is the third book that's coming out later on this year. This one, again, I'm going to have the issue, I think, where I would want to reread, maybe not The Beautiful, but potentially The Damned before reading it. Because my memory is going a little bit for The Damned. So I don't know if I'm going to get to it right away. I also don't know how many books are in this series, whether it's a trilogy, and if I read that one, I'll be finished, or if it's going to be much wider and there's going to be many more that I am not aware of. I'm sure this might end up being sat on my incomplete series for a little bit. Definitely one that I want to continue in, but I don't know if I'm going to be continuing straight away. Now for the books that have a release coming out next year, so they can be continuing to sit on my up-to-date series list for a little while before I have to do some work on them. The first one being Crescent City, or House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. This came out in March 2020 and I read it then. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I've loved pretty much everything by Sarah J Maas, so that's no surprise at all, really. And the second book is coming out in February, I believe. I definitely plan to reread this before that instalment, so potentially end of December, beginning of January, I would like to reread this because I absolutely loved it when I read it, and the details of it are going a little bit foggy now, and I would want to go into the second book with all the facts very fresh in my head. Additionally, next year, the third and final book of the Foundryside series is coming out. I have read both Foundryside and Shorefall. I have loved a lot of Robert Jackson Bennett's books. I have read both this series and the Divine Cities series, which I really liked the Divine Cities. I think Foundryside and this series is still my favourite, purely because I think I just like the magic system, the characters, the world in this a little bit more. I am very excited for the third book. I feel like it's been a long time coming. I feel like I read this book a very long time ago. I read Shorefall in 2020, so it would have been a while. It's been a while, and I'm like, it's definitely time for that third book. I really feel like it's needed now. And I would definitely recommend picking up this series if you haven't already and being ready for that third book. Another one is the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I have read the 3 books that are published in this series. She has had a spin-off book, A Shadow in the Ember, come out, which is set in the same world but following different characters. And it does say that you should read that before continuing this series. But I think I've not paused this series, that feels a bit dramatic, but I feel, no, pause is probably the right word. Because I loved the first 2 books in this series and then I was quite disappointed in the third book, I decided that I think I'm going to wait until the rest of the series is now published. There's going to be 6 books in this series plus this spin-off, and I think I'm going to wait until everything is published and then I'll just do a binge and I'll read the whole thing. And I feel like that might be better for my enjoyment instead of feeling like I have to keep waiting for the releases, because then if there's a book that's a slight disappointment, I can just go straight into the next one or have everything on hand. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this, but for now it is up to date. It's not going to be up to date for very long, but for now it is. So now we're moving into ones which I believe have releases coming out next year, but they don't have like concrete release dates where it's got a set date when it's coming out. The first one of these is The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. I have read the first 2 books in this trilogy this year. So the first one being The Forgetting Moon, the second one being The Blackest Heart. I have loved them both. These have been sort of highlights of the third quarter. I really enjoyed them. Epic fantasy, twists, turns, the characters, just the magic system, the prophecies, the setting of the like castle, the assassins, the secret passageways, the magical artifacts, the prophecy. Like, it's just got so many elements that I love in a fantasy book. So many elements. Bit darker than my usual taste, but but that shouldn't hold you back from reading these. Like, such an epic story. The third book I believe was meant to have come out this year in like November 2021, but it didn't, and now I believe it is coming out in the summer of 2022, but I don't think there is like a concrete release date yet for that third book. I want it. I really want it. I want it now, but hopefully it will be summer 2022. I really do hope that we get it then. That one I sort of had a theory on a date. These ones I don't have a theory on a date. So the first one being The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, the first book in the Bloodsworn series. This came out in the spring this year, so part of me hopes that we will get book 2 in the spring of 2022. I don't know if that's just me hoping, but hopefully we'll get the second book next year. If you don't know, I'm like a big John Gwynne fangirl because I have loved pretty much everything John Gwynne has written. I love Banished Lands and that whole like saga with them, with like the Faithful and the Fallen, followed by Of Blood and Bone. So like I have loved pretty much everything he has written. I just loved like the fantasy, but also like the really close like family dynamics, the twists, the turns, the battle scenes. Oh, it's just so good. It's so good. I'm very intrigued to see where this goes next. This is definitely darker than the Banished Lands, and so I feel like everyone was at risk of dying in the Banished Lands, but I feel like there's more risks of dying here. I feel like there's going to be a death. It's going to be a death. And I don't know if I'm ready for it, but yeah, I'm very excited to see where this goes next. A bit less deadly is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I read this earlier this year. It was one of the arcs that I read. I believed it was a standalone, and it is not a standalone. It is a series. I got to the end and I was like, oh, there's more. There's more that I don't have. So I don't know anything about when the sequel is coming out. I've assumed that it will be in a year's time, but I don't know if this is like a duology or a trilogy or much about it. I've just made an assumption based on this coming out in September that the second one will come out next September, but maybe that's ambitious, I don't know, but that is what I believe. And then the third one, where I believe the next book is coming out in 2022, is A Deadly Education, the School of Maths trilogy. I have read both A Deadly Education and The Last Graduate, which came out this year, and I believe the third book should be coming out in 2022, and that will round off this trilogy. I have liked this, not loved it, but I have liked it well enough. I find it's got this really interesting premise, but I have struggled a little bit with the writing style, which is weird because I have read and loved Uprooted and Spinning Silver, but I feel as though they're written by two completely different authors because the writing style is so different between the two. Then it's not comparable at all, which makes me interested to see how Temeraire is written as well, whether that's more on the side of Uprooted, Spinning Silver, or more on the side of this, because it's very, very bizarrely different. But I am interested enough in the plot and the characters to keep going despite my struggles with the writing style, which sort of, you're having this plot and then suddenly you're going off on a tangent about some world building. It just feels a bit clunky where the world building is placed. But yes, interested to see how this concludes. And another one which I don't own, but I believe the sequel to the duology is coming out next year, is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I read that this year and I really liked it, and I believe that it's being all wrapped up next year with the sequel. It leans a lot more historical than fantasy, which I didn't know going in, and I think it's one with like some really interesting themes and premises, like the way that it deals with gender identity and prophecy and our destiny, but I didn't ever connect to the characters. So there were elements and parts of the book where I was really invested, really into it, really into the scenery and the world. And then there were other parts where I was like, why are you doing that? Like, what is going on here? So, but I am definitely intrigued to see where it goes next. And then I have a few here where I don't know when the next book is coming out, unfortunately. And who knows, I could be sitting on these books for a while. Hopefully not. So the first one being A Court of Silver Flames, or the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J Maas. Because I know that we're getting Crescent City 2 next year, that's got its firm date. I don't believe we'll be getting this in 2022. I believe we'll get the sequel in 2023 now. That would be my assumption, that it would be in another year's time. So I'm going to be caught up with this for a little while, I believe. But I know that there will be more books in this world. Another one where I have no idea what the date is going to be on it is the sequel to Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And part of me is like, why did I start this series? Because I gave this book 5 stars. I really, really liked it. It's my favourite Leigh Bardugo book. But also, I was not expecting to read this in 2019 and still be waiting at the end of 2021 for the sequel. It was 2019? I read this when it came out. Yeah, 2019. I expected, maybe a year, so you get the second one in 2020, and now it's going to be 2022, so it's been a very long time. And I think this is meant to be an expansive series with multiple books in it, a larger series, not just a trilogy, a larger series, and it's taken so long to go from book 1 to book 2. I'm like, what's gone wrong? I know she's been very busy working on the Grishaverse stuff, which is fine, but can we go back to Ninth House, please? I just want more in this world. I want more here. So, and I guess when I do get it, I'm going to have to reread this. But I really liked this, and we'll definitely read the sequel when it comes out, if and when it ever comes out. One that I have just read is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake, and this is a trilogy. The reason I don't know when the sequel is coming out for this one is because it has just been picked up by a traditional publisher. This was self-published. And I believe that it's being republished by Tor in the spring. And I think some extra work is going into this to tighten it up. I think she is writing or has written some of the sequel, but I don't know, because the first book is being republished by Tor, I can't see them releasing the second book within the same year. So part of me would think that there's going to be a delay between that republished first book and the sequel. But I'll read it when it comes out, but I could see that being a little bit longer. And then the final one where I am up to date and waiting for the sequel, and this one I'm not sure if the sequel is ever going to come, is The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. I really like this. This one really surprised me. I wasn't expecting anything because no one really talks about The Arithmetist. And the thing is, it's marketed as a standalone. And I'm like, it's not standalone because it ends on a cliffhanger. Like, why have you put this in a standalone? It's not. It's just not got a sequel yet. I didn't realise that, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really like these characters. I really like the magic system, and I want the sequel. But because Brandon Sanderson is a busy man, this series always gets pushed by the wayside because he's been writing like Skyward and Era 2 of Mistborn and the Stormlight Archive, and he forgets about The Arithmetist. And I'd like another Arithmetist book, the sequel, because this came out in 2013. It's almost 10 years old. It's getting old now. 10 years without its sequel. It's lonely. Those are the series that I am up to date on and waiting for sequels for. I have really tried my best to not start that many incomplete series and just read series that are complete and like read them through. And I've also been trying to avoid starting series where we don't know if we're ever going to get the final book, like The Kingkiller Chronicles, because then I'd know that series would sit on this list indefinitely. And I ideally would like to have both my list of up-to-date series and my list of incomplete series low. And then it stresses me out having the number too high. And ideally I'd like this number of 16 to be lower. But I know it's unrealistic to get it so low because I do really, really enjoy starting series. In total, there are 16 books here in my up-to-date series list. Let me know how many series you are up to date on and waiting for the release of the next book. And thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!